Fast Track Workshop. I've got Professor Courtney McNamara in the studio with me. I'm Professor David Stuckler, and we're going to dive straight in. Courtney, your top tip for this week for our researchers, grads, and other students here in the community.
Yeah, so my top tip this week is to give yourself a break. And I don't mean that narrowly, like take a day off. Of course, if you need a day off, take a day off. But more so recognize that doing academic research, writing a PhD, writing a master's thesis is going to involve a series of ups and downs. And just remember that, everyone gets rejections. Everyone has bad writing days. So don't let the downs, bring you too down. So give yourself a break. If you're having a bad writing day, go do something else for a little while. It happens to everyone.
I love this tip, Courtney, and it's deceptively simple because I remember myself when I'm right under a tight deadline, I'm working really hard. I feel guilty if I go take a break, if I go step away. And I'm the type of person that if something needs to be done, I feel like I need to chain myself to the desk until the task is done. How do you combat that?
I don't know. I think I've learned to recognize that when I'm in that stressful mode, I don't work well, and also ideas don't come to me well. And I think some of my best ideas haven't happened when I'm in front of the computer. It's been when I'm doing something completely different, not working at all. So I think I've gotten better at, if I'm having a bad writing day, to know that I can just step away and that it's a new day tomorrow.
100%. Actually, I'm really glad you mentioned that because I like this concept, and as you know, with a lot of students we work with, of an activating break. And it's really true that some of your best ideas come to you when you're in the shower, when you're on a walk in nature, when you're maybe at the gym or doing yoga or meditating. And that's partly because you've really got, I think of it as you've kind of revved your engine up. It's red hot, and there's so much smoke and fire, but your mind's churning. There's ideas brewing there, and you need to give your mind a chance, have that calm, so that those ideas can float to the surface, so that your conscious mind can recognize them. So you're actually giving your subconscious mind a bit of a break and room to breathe to catch those ideas. So I like thinking this break. The way it helped me to not feel guilty is thinking of it as activating, and it's actually really constructive and renewing you. So Courtney, that's an awesome tip for this week. And I think it's really important because we're going into the summer for many of you. And several of you are working really hard. Some of our students trying to finish their dissertations, get the big projects done. And I think it is important to plan out a break. By the way, you have anything fun coming up this summer as we go here into August? I know you've got some family in Italy.
No, yeah, usually we do go to Italy for August, but this year we're spending August moving, so it's still exciting.
That's right. Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Courtney has a very well-deserved, awesome transition to Newcastle, where she's also going to be building up a research team, taking on exciting projects. So if you want to get to know Courtney in the DMs, I'm professor at Bocconi in Milan, so my life feels like a permanent vacation being in Italy, but then I get the great joy of working with all of you and our fast-track coaching students. And I'm actually going to be staying in Milan for most of myself. But yeah, so listen, I want to welcome everybody today because especially our new members in the Fast Track group. By the way, if you haven't joined our Facebook group already, that is your chance, easy way to get in touch with us regularly. It's like having several top faculty in the world in your corner helping you out. And what we try to do in Fast Track is provide more value, 100% free, the open access to the community than you're going to find from what most people would charge you. I mean, I had a really bumpy road along the way as a first gen grad student back in the prehistoric period. And what I found is that a lot of my students during the time of COVID were really feeling isolated and lonely. And that's why we created the Fast Track community to provide support, mentorship, and guidance, especially for students who don't have any or who are struggling to get those big projects done. So you're going to want to check out our writing training, our productivity training, our networking training. We have a vast array of mini courses that have helped our students get amazing results. If you're having trouble finding any of those, get in touch with us and we will personally connect you to them. So with that, we're going to cover 3 biggest mistakes researchers make. And I've seen these mistakes over and over and over, and they drive me crazy because these are mistakes that bedevil not just the bad students. It's who right, struggle, and the reality is 1 in 3 students don't finish who start a graduate program. But these are mistakes that really cripple and debilitate some of the best students that I've worked with. And when I talk with many students after, at the end of their PhDs, I like to ask them, what would you have done differently? And these are the things that they say. And I don't want you to fall into these traps or these common pitfalls that I've seen students who have worked with. Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, places where I've been tenured faculty. Not Harvard, only Oxford and Cambridge tenured, but anyway. So I really want to get into these. So I'm really excited about these mistakes. And Courtney, I know you've experienced some of these with your students too. So I just want to jump in the chat and make sure everybody's with us. So if you guys are ready to hear what the first mistake is, let us know in the chat. I'm just going to reach out, keep this on the social so everybody's with us, and say hi directly on the chat here in Facebook. Welcome everyone. And yep. So we are going to jump in. There we go. That should come through. If you guys, we take all your questions in the chat. So do drop us a line. We will have some time for questions and answers at the end. Several of you do submit to our session. When we get good submissions, then we do like to cover them. But this week we're going to be doing more workshop. But if you guys come with something in the chat and comments, we will have time at the end. So let me dive through. So our first big mistake, not the number one mistake, but a pretty big one that many students have told me afterwards that they wish they would have done. If you watch the session with Yushi, who is one of our star students, this is the mistake that she said she felt she made, and that's also, you can find that video in the group. First big mistake, not having a roadmap plan. Not having a roadmap plan, by which I mean not having a clear step-by-step plan of action that's going to take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go, whether that's publishing your first paper, publishing maybe 10 papers in a year, which is the kinds of results some of our students are getting, or to finishing your PhD over the next few months. Courtney, tell us a little bit about what we mean when we talk about a roadmap plan and why we set up all our students with these roadmaps.
Yeah, so, thinking about the roadmap at the beginning, one of the first things that we do when a student comes to us is we ask them about what their gap in the literature is. And this is an issue that comes up a lot with students. So they'll bring to us a piece of a chapter or their thesis that they're working on, and we'll work backwards to try and figure out what the gap is. And sometimes that's not even clear. And now if you're doing PhD level work, this is what is setting you up to be able to obtain a PhD. You have to show that you're making a new contribution to the literature. And if you haven't been able to identify your gap yet, then you're not going to be able to do that.
100%. I mean, that gap, a lot of students I see, they're at a very advanced stage. And this is a long journey. People often say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And they're at a very late point, and you don't want to have to go backwards to the beginning and start things over because you didn't get a first step right, or maybe you skipped past it. You were in such a hurry to get to where you were going that you didn't make the right stops along the way. And that gap is a pretty important one to make sure that you've identified. I mean, with that gap and kind of setting yourself up for success, right? That gap and the clear idea of how you're going to address that gap really need to be there. What other things really are those milestones need to be in that roadmap as well? What are some other important things, Courtney?
Yeah, well, thinking about your gap, I mean, it's important not just to think, I haven't seen anyone else write this paper, therefore I'm going to do this paper. And that's obviously my gap. You need to think critically about what previous literature has said and done, and make sure that the work that you're doing makes sense conceptually and theoretically with this previous work. So maybe people haven't done that question precisely because it doesn't make theoretical or empirical sense to do that work. So it's not just, picking a question that you think is interesting, but it's about putting the legwork behind it and making sure that how you're going to answer that question and the question itself makes sense. So it's easy to feel like you want to jump in and start looking for data and doing the analyses, but I think, the work that you do up front is going to pay off in bucket loads later on.
So I think a few things. It's really interesting because I think some students kind of just get with their PhD, they get in the car and they drive, and they're just like, I'm going to go, go, go. But what I'm hearing a bit of what you're saying is, right, for each of these milestones along the way, you need to define the gap. You need to, have this plan to complete the chapters and this defined timeline. You need to know kind of where you're going and then implement. So if one of the big things in your roadmap start is I need to identify the gap, there's a right and a wrong way to go about that. But you need to be aware that this is one of the critical first steps. And I hope all of you watching, right, one of the first steps in the roadmap, I hope all of you have identified this gap. This is one of the very important first steps in our roadmap. So have a think about this for yourselves. Do you know what your gap is? If not, by the way, we have some really good training on finding your topic, all about using our convergence method to find that gap. Drop me a line in the DMs or comment below, and we'll be sure to set you up with that. So, but Courtney, what are some other steps, though? I like this. I think we could talk more about finding the gap, and if you guys are interested in that, comment, let us know. We'll go a little bit deeper on how you can find your gap here and cover that. But some other elements of the roadmap I like to include is you really need, once you found that gap, to make sure your supervisors or mentors in your program are on board and they agree that this is the right thing. Because I often see a lot of students, when they haven't made this roadmap, they don't have clarity on their gap and they don't have buy-in from their supervisors, and this creates problems down the road. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, the not having buy-in with supervisors can cause real issues down the road, because you're going one way, and if your supervisor isn't in the car with you, then he might not be behind that idea, and you're going to be depending on your supervisor for the support and the ideas that you're going to be constructing and testing. And if he's not on board with that, there's going to be a lot of tension around that. Supervisors are often co-authors, and now if you started this journey without sharing and agreeing where you're going with that, then some tensions can definitely arise there, and you don't want to get so far down the road and then have a falling out with your supervisor because of this thing that could have been fine if you just talked about it up front. But
Yeah, and I think some students, what I found is they maybe even at the outset might not have that good rapport or connection with their supervisor, and so they just go off on their own, and then they get a big shock later on where all that work they've done, all that energy is not what their faculty want, and now they're in a very difficult position. Again, because they didn't follow this roadmap. The other thing I think is really important about a roadmap is when you have a clear plan, you can decide, what do you need to focus on and what do you not need to focus on right now. I think one easy thing to happen to a lot of grad students is you get pulled in so many different directions that and it only gets worse as you go on. I mean, you can see this as a faculty member, I'm sure, Courtney. Hey, be on this committee. Hey, do this, help us with this. And having a clear roadmap, I find, helps students to say no. And that is very hard because you're kind of young and new in the field and you want to please everybody and get everybody on board. And it's easy to say yes, 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 but you actually need to learn to say no. And that roadmap saying, this is my laser-like focus on this right now, I found helps our students to say no. What do you think, Courtney? I mean, I imagine you relate to getting pulled into many, many different things.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, practically my strategy here is actually to block out my time on my calendar. And if I do agree to something, it's, it has to be worthwhile and important. And I'll, again, block out that time in my calendar. If it's just looking at, a paper or doing a peer review, I'm still going to block out those 2 hours to make sure that during the week I have all of my hours to do my research and the time to spend with my students. That's sort of a practical side of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that blocking the calendar works. I also think there's an element of daily execution of showing up. I mean, your top tip for this week, activating breaks. I really like that. And I think a lot of students haven't really thought critically about the structure of their day because with these big research projects, you've got to consistently show up and have blocks of an hour and a half to 2 hours, not just now and then 3 weeks from now. It's really hard. Some students I see trying to dip into the research and then dip in later, and it's so hard to get back into the complexity of it. It's so hard to just swoop in and out. It's very, very inefficient. So I think part of that road mapping also means taking a hard look at your own diary, your own calendar, and figuring out how can I protect these blocks of time? How do I structure my day to ensure that I really can match what I'm doing with the time, energy, investment to see it through? Yeah, and is that something you did actively, Courtney? You talked about blocking off time. Was that you were blocking off actually? Hey, I'm not going to have the kids around. I'm going to be here. How did you do that?
Yeah, definitely. So I've seen people do this, successfully in different ways. I know people who set a goal each day. So if they know they're working on a chapter or something, they say, I'm going to write 1,000 words today, or I'm going to complete this section of the chapter. And I know that works really well for some people to have that commitment to that goal. For me, I've always had the commitment to the routine of blocking off those 3 hours, and because I know if I work for 3 hours, I'm going to feel good about what I've done. I'm going to feel like I've had a good day. And then more macroly planning out like the time I need to finish a project or something like that.
I like that. I mean, and these are really the habits that come later, whether you go on and do consulting with UN. Courtney and I, for example, are working on a project with the World Health Organization right now, and it's the same thing. We got a timeline, we've got to divvy up tasks and figure out how are we going to execute and deliver on this in the time that we have. And those kind of good habits you want to ingrain now. And this applies through all walks of life, especially so with a very big project that many of you are doing in research. One other thing I want to bring up, Courtney, too, that I know is really critical. Whenever I make a roadmap with a student, I always want to make sure that if they have any areas that they think they need to develop or work on, that we try to have a discovery process and identify that up front. Maybe it is they know in the roadmap, hey, my writing is just not as strong as it needs to be, or have another challenge to address, and make sure you know that about yourself, that it's okay. You're doing this training, you're going down this journey, and this is critical time to invest in yourself to strengthen these areas. You're not going to get that kind of time in the future. I mean, I can't speak for you, Courtney, but I know for me to go get new skills or work on areas of weakness, I'm just executing with the stock of knowledge and talent that I have, rather than trying to build up new skills. It's so hard to find the time. And I got one example here, and I thought it might be concrete. One student says, my big problem is to link local experience to an international audience. And I think it's really helpful to know, say, hey, maybe I'm coming from a developing country, and that can make it very hard. I mean, we have a lot of students, for example, say in defining their topic and the gap, say, I'm really interested in doing this in Azerbaijan, but it's very, very hard to publish in top international journals. So that's really great if you can recognize this, because then you've got to factor in space on your roadmap for how to deal with this, and find ways to get the right support for that. So taking this as an example, Courtney, how would you try, if you're making a roadmap, student comes to you and says, my big problem here is to link local experience to an international audience, how would you go about factoring that into a roadmap?
Yeah, so factoring this in, it might touch on something we'll talk about later about mentors, but that's a really good way to start thinking more broadly about a specific local topic, is talking with some senior colleagues in the field who know how some of these local problems fit into wider debates within the field. So that's some of things on offer by your mentor. That's one of the key things that they can do for your research, actually.
Yeah, so I think that's really important. Is it also here is to plug. I think finding then a network. So I think sometimes students, I mean, in developing countries, they're saying, "Well, how do I do this?" And you need to plug yourself into those conversations, into those networks, and that's very hard to do on your own. So I think if this were a student coming to me and say, "Well, let's construct a roadmap together," one of building your network would be a really important element here to help you automatically in conversations at conferences and other settings start trying to explain your local.
I think we might have lost David for a minute. But we had a whole session not too long ago on how to build your network. And one of the things we talked about was, building on your own strengths. Don't feel like, you have to become an extrovert to build your network. But just play on your own strengths. If you're feeling uncomfortable right now with walking into a conference room and putting your hand up and asking a question, then start off, going on Twitter and involving yourself in the debate there. I mean, every day on Twitter, there's a new public health debate, for instance. So that's one good way that you can do that. So I think David has just dropped off, but he'll be back. So like I said, we have a whole session on developing your network. I think different people do it different ways. And sorry, David, go ahead. I was just talking about our session on developing a network.
I missed that last part, Courtney, but I'm glad you could keep things flowing. I have some patchy internet where I'm at.
Okay, yeah.
Courtney, I'm going to take a couple others on this, though, because I think this is a really good example of how you guys, it's really good. Many of you can recognize your own challenge and think about how you can factor this in. For example, here's another one saying, what are the main challenges of high quality journals? And I think I think it's really important in the roadmap to also thread in your goals. So if your goal is I want to publish in a high impact journal, or maybe your goal is you just want to publish, or maybe your goal is to finish, your roadmap needs to be connected to where you're trying to go. And I just see so many students saying, I want to publish in high impact journals, but they haven't chosen the road that's going to get them there. They get to the end of the road and they're like, well, all the journals are rejecting my papers. What did I do wrong? And it starts back at earlier choices that you've made. So yeah, I think having the challenges in there, but also having these goals in your roadmap is really important to think hard. And I don't think students are really encouraged. They don't get that kind of support and career guidance to think about sometimes why they're doing a PhD or a master's degree and how that research is going to fit into their longer term plans. Have you experienced that with some of the students you've worked with too, Courtney?
Yeah, so it's one of the first questions I ask any student I work with is like, what's our end game here? Like, are you, when you finish your PhD, what do you want to do next? And, for some students, it's that they want to go down the academic path. And for other students, it's not. They want to go maybe into research more generally or a policy think group. So I have very different strategies I would take with those two different students. So if a student says that they want to go on to be an academic, then yeah, we have to hit all of those milestones, like publishing in high impact journals, making sure you're presenting at top level international conferences. I've had other students that are more interested in the sort of skills that they'll come out with. So they want to be doing social media analyses. So we'll focus on building that into their PhD. But thinking about that up front is going to save you so much trouble at the end. Yeah. I think, my own experience, like this is one of the mistakes I think I made, is that I think I knew I wanted to be an academic, but I was more driven by my research ideas than the impact of my research. And I should have thought more about what is this contributing to these sort of higher impact debates.
I think it's really hard to think about contributions and impact, because I remember when I was early on, I couldn't tell if I was making a big contribution or a little contribution. I just don't have that depth or that experience or that nose to kind of I mean, one of personal when writing, I really like Ernest Hemingway, and people ask Ernest Hemingway, well, Ernest, why is your writing so good? How are you so great at this? What can we learn? And he said, and sorry for my language, he said, well, you need to have a really good shit detector. And I just didn't have a good shit detector. I couldn't tell when something was crap or really good, had big impact, didn't have big impact, because I just was too inexperienced. And that's okay. So part of that, if you want impact, and there's multiple types of impact, I think that's really important to get on the roadmap as well. So I really, thanks for sharing that with us, Courtney. It's hard to see now because your work has had such high impact in the field, so it's kind of hard to imagine, but we all start somewhere. Okay, I think it's a good point for us to go into mistake number 2. If you guys are ready for mistake number 2, let us know here in the comments. And this mistake, I think, This is good. We're going to move into a mistake that I made a lot. This is this is, I think, one that especially, I think the roadmap one is students just don't think about. I think this mistake here is one that we're coming to that students really do think about and fall into it and maybe even think about too much. So, mistake number 2. And I really think this mistake is a little bit of a myth, to be honest. It's a mistake that I think we sometimes perpetuate ourselves, and sometimes even professors can inadvertently perpetuate in students. And mistake 2, it has to be perfect. So many students fall into this. I was just working with one this week who is going in circles on a chapter because she wants it to be perfect. And Courtney, tell us a bit about this experience. Have you had this happen to you? Do you see it a lot in students? Where
Yeah,
when
I,
did this
I
happen?
do. Yeah, unfortunately, I do. It's really interesting because it's the students that are so focused on things being perfect that take longer to come around to not just finishing their work, but to meeting all sorts of milestones. So it's the students that are just happy to keep coming back with questions every week, and they're not afraid of red marks on their papers. Those are the ones that things might start off slow because there's lots of questions, but they're going to pick things up quickly and just zoom ahead of these other students who are still focused on the last 3 paragraphs of their conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I see lots of students struggle with this.
Yeah, I slip into this because I like to dot the I's and cross the T's, and I want it to be really airtight and solid. But the truth is, the more you work on things, you might get some incremental improvements. But sometimes I've seen students even go the other way, start making things worse. They get so close to a document, they can't see the big picture, and it's counterproductive. It's also counterproductive because you have limited time. You got to get on to the next thing. So I really encourage our students to think about high quality work, of course, but think about good enough for your roadmap, for your goals right now. And that old cliche, perfect is the enemy of the good, is really true when it comes to research.
Yeah.
Just thinking of this, I mean, how can somebody recognize, Courtney, if they're falling into this? Because it can be really subtle. You might not tell yourself, oh, of course it doesn't have to be perfect, but then still obsessively work on something to make it perfect. How do you
Yeah.
how do you catch yourself if this is happening? Because
Yeah.
we can see it on our students saying, "Hey, you got to show up and this is already way better than you need and go on." But the student still doesn't even realize that. They think, no, it has to be better, it has to be better. But if you ask them,
Yeah.
are you a perfectionist? They might not even say that they are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this comes back to the importance of the roadmap and having those goals. If you see that you're starting to slip on those goals, then there's a good idea there that you have some perfectionist tendencies.
Yeah.
So if you see yourself slipping on, if you're setting up daily timelines or weekly goals and you're missing those, then yeah, that's something you need to work on. And actually having those like, for instance, I block out those times. Like if I have a paper I need to review, I'm going to block out this amount of time for it. And if I'm at the end of that time, I know this is it. I have to be done at the end of this time. I'm not going to let myself come back to it tomorrow because tomorrow I have time blocked out for something else.
Yeah.
So having a routine like that helps you sort of push through those perfectionist tendencies.
Courtney, I don't know if you're losing me here, but just to say, we've got some students saying I experienced mistake 2, and that led me to frustration. And we got another one saying perfectionism is a major problem affecting me too. Again, really glad that you guys are willing to be out there and share that with us because this is so common, and it's so common with the brightest and best students. And I often think of this perfectionism as a little bit like a dictatorship in your life because you have other things that you need to get on with and do, and this thing that you're working on, this one thing, is kind of trumping and taking over everything in your life and crowding out all these other important and urgent things that you have to do. So that accountability that can come from your roadmap of pre-specifying, hey, this is my timeline. And if you see that slipping, then you've got to give yourself that grace to accept, hey, this is good enough for right now. I need to keep things moving and move on to the next thing. Maybe that's the point where you share your paper with your supervisors, with your co-authors, with your community, and get their feedback while you can move on. Any other tips, Courtney? Things come to mind to help with combat perfectionism? This is
Yeah.
really
Well,
sticking.
I was just talking to a student today, actually, who said, I know that saying that I have to kill my little darlings, but I can't. I really can't kill my little darlings. And so you have to think about what are the sort of things that you're focusing on in terms of perfection. So for this student, I said, don't kill your little darlings. Put them somewhere else. So it's not about deleting that whole paragraph. Maybe, you can find use for it somewhere else. And actually, this is something I do. I don't always just delete my work and then it's gone forever. I put it in a different document, notes about topic A or B, C, and then move on. Just so you just have to think about what the roadblocks are for you and find ways that you can get over them, really.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, I do see some students too with the perfectionist can be linked in to say, oh, well, this bit of writing is really perfect and it needs to stay in. That can be the other side of perfectionism, but then it doesn't really fit in your outline or what you're trying to write at that point. So I like that idea of, well, this idea that you're not just throwing it away, you're putting somewhere else. I remember as a student, I had too many ideas. I had loads of ideas and I wanted to pursue them all. And I had a book of ideas. So just find your filing cabinet, your mental warehouse where you can park these things so they don't get in the way of what you need to focus on now. Really like this, guys. If you have some strategies on perfectionism that have helped you, that's what this community is about. Drop that in the comments. Let us know, because other people watching this are going to really get a lot of value and support if you've had some things that helped you break this curse, this trap of perfectionism that we can so often put on ourselves.
Yeah.
I think
I think the other thing to think about, if you're writing a paper or something, I see lots of students get stuck before they publish because they want to anticipate every single thing that a reviewer might say. But a reviewer is going to they have to find something to write back to the journal about. So they're going to find something. So don't try and, don't spend weeks just trying to anticipate every single little thing that they're going to find something. I think, David, you said you knew some colleagues who even purposefully left things out so that they could find that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so glad you brought this towards publishing, because I deal with this with faculty who want to get tenure and they're having trouble submitting their papers to journals. These are ones who already got their PhD, they're under pressure, they're on the tenure track, and they want to crack into very high impact journals. And they keep telling themselves, oh, well, if I'm going to submit to the Lancet or I'm going to submit to American Sociological Review, it has to be perfect. Right? I'm going to get attacked by people in the field. It has to get to this next unattainable level that nobody gets to. And the interesting thing I found is often when I've published in these top journals, including those two I just mentioned several times, sometimes it's not even what I thought was my best work that got into those journals. And I realized early on what I thought was an amazing contribution wasn't necessarily what other people thought. And it can be very easy to lose sight of the big contribution of your paper as you get lost in trying to make everything perfect in it. So yeah, you do want to anticipate a reviewer criticisms, but don't let that hold you back. I had a co-author on a paper who we were in this very situation. He didn't want to submit the paper because he thought he was going to embarrass himself. It wasn't going to be good enough for the journal, and the editors would think badly or think ill of him submitting an imperfect paper to the journal. Where odds are you submit to the journal, you're going to get just rejected. That's just the stats. That's just the numbers. When a journal like the Lancet, where less than 1 in 50 papers are going to get sent for review. So this is really key. Coming to your point, Courtney, about leaving something out. Yeah, I mean, I often like to say there's beauty in imperfection, and especially in the eyes of reviewers. So, they're going to try to find something. So if you can take something, sometimes I have had people write papers and take something very easy out, kind of opening the door, say, hey, reviewer, look here, point to this, so that they can go back in and, oh, yes, very good point, and I'm going to drop that right back in. So that beauty and imperfection can actually be quite strategic in your papers.
Yeah.
I just want to add in, Jasmine is commenting here. as computer science education PhD candidate, the perfectionism is really hard to deal with. I see this. I think people, again, they might be start to be aware. So being aware of this, Jasmine, is really great. And I think this has to be, if you know this, has to be on your roadmap, and have to start coming up with strategies to combat this. On the way, if you find this is slowing you down, this is holding you back. So Jasmine, really would encourage you. I think, Courtney, would you agree with this? I think, like we were saying, roadmap, timelines, and force yourself to move on. And Jasmine, I would say, if you're getting this perfectionism, I find some students feel some comfort in having somebody that they trust, they respect in their corner to say, hey, Jasmine, this is good enough. You got to move on to the next thing. Yeah, well, any thoughts here for Jasmine?
Yeah, I think everything is tying together with these tips. Is that mentorship becomes really important here, because having someone in your corner to be able to tell you that is really good. Sometimes that's, you just need that little push, someone to say, yeah, this looks great, and then you can feel confident in submitting it through.
Yep. So I think this is really a nice segue into mistake number 3. I think some of you guys can already guess what mistake number 3 is. So yeah, if you guys are ready for mistake number 3, then let us know. I'm just prepping this so I can drop it on the screen in a second. Yeah, mistake number 3 is another one I think several of you might have slipped into, several of you watching. This is one that I also slipped into. And again, I think I could have dealt with this if I had been strategic and I had the foresight, I think a roadmap early on where really reflected about my strengths and areas for development, I would have spotted some of these things and been able to take corrective action. Just looking in the chat. By the way, we had a question about coming back to the research gap. We'll try to check that out later. Okay, mistake number 3, guys. Mistake number 3, and see if this applies to some of you. And mistake number 3 is thinking you can do it all on your own. And this. Oh man, this is so frustrating because it's really bright students who have been good, been getting top marks, who just want to run and figure everything out, but then don't have somebody they can turn to for help, or aren't willing to ask for help when they need it. And the truth is, no matter how good you are, you're entering into a new field. This is an apprenticeship system where somebody's going to pass on that knowledge to you. It's almost impossible to just do this all on your own. And some people, they get in maybe they don't have the best relationship with their supervisor. Effectively, maybe they don't think they can do it all on their own, but in practice, that's what they're trying to do. I mean, how many times have you seen this with students, Courtney, that have just been flying solo for a long time and really
Yeah,
are in
yeah.
a bad way because of it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things playing into this. I think, imposter syndrome is a big one, trying to show that you can do it all on your own, thinking you're meant to be this super independent researcher, making your own independent contribution to the literature. So I think that plays into it a lot. Myself personally, I don't think that I thought I could do it all on my own. I thought I had to do it all on my own. So I thought that, I saw other researchers in my area, but they weren't really doing exactly what I was doing. And so I thought, well, no one's doing this, so there's no one for me to connect to. But since then, I've learned so much just by bringing those people into my community and learning way more than I thought I could from people who are actually doing different stuff from me, but it's informed my own work and so much more.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned this thing on imposter syndrome. If you guys haven't heard of that before, many, in case you haven't, it's just feeling like you're not good enough, you don't belong, like they're gonna find out about you, like you're a fraud, and I think that can lead people, like you say, Courtney, to say, I have to prove to everybody, I have to prove to myself as well that I can do this. And I think one of the reasons that people also slip into this is because everybody's posting on Instagram, oh, look, I effortlessly look like a Greek god, right? And it's the same with the academic stuff. Like, I effortlessly am gliding from one success to another. And we have this myth often about mentors and great people like, oh, Elon Musk must be a super genius or Albert Einstein is a super genius. No, the truth is they trained. They got a lot of help behind the scenes, and they don't publicize that. They don't show that on their social media accounts, but they all got a lot of support along the way. This idea of this great person who's just a super genius is really just a myth, no matter how high your IQ is. They all get help and support. So you've got to do that. And that help and support takes a number of forms. One of the critical piece of that support is having a mentor. And a supervisor is not a mentor. Really important to clarify. You need to have somebody in your corner who wants to see you succeed and can connect you with the skills, the resources, the networks, and open the doors, hold you accountable. The things that a true mentor does. I mean, Courtney, I had a bunch of mentors along the way. Did you have some mentors or some people that were there? Or?
Yeah, I did. I came a little late to the game, I think, but I found so many doors opened as soon as I had locked in a few mentors. It's it's really about seeing behind the scenes too with a mentor. They've seen so much, they know the rules of the game of academia, then all of a sudden, through them you also get to unlock this information and see sort of behind the scenes what's going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, the sooner you can start this, the better. And there's a process for actively reaching out to mentors and connecting with them, being strategic about it. All starts with your roadmap. If you do want some training on how even just something as simple, right way to write an email to potential mentors, we've got a really great training in the Facebook group on that. And the thing with mentors too is, I mean, you're going to need recommendation letters wherever you go. I have my students come back to me again and again. They need strong recommendation letters. You need a mentor, somebody in your corner who can help you with that. So it's kind of indispensable anyway. And I want to hear Jasmine came back in, and thanks to get Jasmine's comment. Saying, I struggle with this too. It can be very isolating because I feel a lot of pressure to do it by myself, to prove myself, and to immediately get it right. What would you say here to Jasmine?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, the nature of doing a PhD sometimes, just in the way, that even work is structured. You're at your own desk, especially with things with the pandemic, it's hard to see the bigger community out there just by the nature of what we're doing. But finding ways to build your community is so important.
Yeah, by the way, our community, again, my shameless plug, somebody saying as a reason follow your community. Really, there's nothing. I mean, I can say this. I'm really proud of what we're doing here, Courtney, that there's no community out there that I'm aware of like Fast Track. It's truly interdisciplinary that brings people together. And really proud of also, we provide lots of support. And when students want help with the implementation of our training, and maybe they feel good, but they just want professors who have been there, done it all before in their corner. We also have a private group that we organize on Slack, and that's a really fun community. We're actually meeting with our students just after this. But you do want to tap into a community. And that community, we talk about mentors, but also a community of peers. When I was a PhD student, I had it's called a cohort effect. Epidemiologists love cohorts. But a group of PhD students, we were all working together. We were all kind of pushing the boundaries of our field, and I learned so much from them. And I think today we've got sometimes toxic cultures in PhD students where they're scared to share ideas that somebody's going to steal them. And we also have the toxic culture that came from COVID where people are just fragmented and isolated from each other, so they don't have the chance to meet up or even have that exchange. So community, did you have a sense of community, Courtney? Where did you find that community for yourself?
Yeah, I found it late in the game also. So I was, like I said before, I was thinking I had to do everything on my own. But I've since been doing putting all my energy in the complete opposite, actually, and it's just paid off so much. One thing I will say is that in our private group, I'm always amazed at the support that students get just from other students in the group. And, a lot of, students will meet and we'll talk about issues. And a student who didn't bring up the issue will be like, oh my gosh, that's happening to me too. This is so helpful. I didn't even think about it that way. So people coming to our sessions without thinking that they didn't have a problem and realizing, oh yeah, I do have a problem, and that's a great solution to it.
Yeah, because I think sometimes, again, if when people are struggling with something, they think, oh, especially it plays into imposter syndrome. Oh, it's just me. There's something wrong with me. But it's just so gratifying, and it almost it's just this huge feeling of relief. Like, oh, wait, you're dealing with that too. You're not alone. You don't have to suffer with this in silence. And that you have people on the journey with you. Yeah, that's really true, Courtney. And I think it's something that it's kind of hard to articulate to people that, hey, yeah, you get value out of working with us, but you get a lot of value from the other people in the community. If you don't have this community, it is kind of like the secret ingredient that just will take you to a next level. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
I wanted to take one other comment here because this can really matter with mentors and plays into the supervisor is not a mentor comment I was making earlier. Someone says, sometimes you give your work to someone for help, but then it just sits there. It stays longer than expected and delays you, and they might only point out mistakes and without providing solutions. I want to ask you what you think about this, but first, I just want to point out that I think a lot of the students we've seen too, and do see, their supervisors are just sometimes patently unhelpful. They get in the way. Can put students down and really criticize, but not constructively to build them up, like they're saying here. And the worst is you send something off, you want some feedback, you're not sure if it's good or not, and it just sits for weeks, and you don't hear anything back. So what do you do? Because odds are this person at this point is not going to change. What do you do on this, Courtney?
Yeah, there's several fronts I think to sort of come at this problem, and one is to, if you are sending something to a supervisor, be upfront and ask them how long they expect to take with it, or if they can give you an idea of when you need to hear back. If it's something that, let's say you're sending off like a conference abstract or something that has a deadline at the end of the next 2 weeks, say, if I don't hear from you by this day, then I'm just going to assume everything's okay and send. So give a little push, put a little fire underneath them to at least get them to respond to you about when they can get back to you, or if they want to input, then you've given them this decision that they have to come back to you with their input before this date, or you're sending it off. So I think trying to tackle it up front is a good strategy.
That's a really good tip. So yeah, it's okay to give your supervisors a gentle nudge. I also think it's helpful to diversify. I mean, if you're not getting the right kind of support, I had different mentors. I knew they would have different roles and add different value. I have one mentor who was a postdoc, and that postdoc was super constructive, where the really famous professor in the field just didn't really have time for me. And sometimes felt did a superficial job. Often was very on point with things, but I actually got more value out of the mentorship from the postdoc. The postdoc was super happy because I'm just a postdoc. Nobody listens to the postdoc. I felt pretty isolated and was really happy to contribute. So I would think of in building your community and building your dream team of support, diversify your mentors again, because I don't think this person's going to change. I think Courtney has a really great tip on nudging them gently. I mean, don't pester them, but that gentle nudge, showing that, hey, I'm an action taker. I'm submitting a conference. I'm trying to get this to the journal. Puts you in a very positive light. Again, that's all something ideally that point of these kind of self-imposed deadlines you need in your roadmap, and that's gonna help you with this too. I've got a couple other comments on this. Somebody's saying here that they get a lot of mental support from us all, and that's really awesome. So happy to hear with that. And Jasmine saying that mentorship definitely helped with a lot on the a little bit of the imposter syndrome. I hope I'm not misinterpreting you here, Jasmine, but also this desire that you have to make everything perfect and get it right. I can't really understate the importance of mentorship and community, and not just flying solo. So, guys, if you're listening to this, take a look at yourself. Are you flying solo? Do you have a community? Do you have a strategic mentor? If the answer is no to any of those on the community and mentor, think about how you can build that up. Think about the steps that you can take today to reach out and get people in your corner. People who want to see you succeed, people who can share in the load, share in the burden, share in the journey with you. It will make a huge difference to your life. We got some time for other questions. Courtney, do you have any other thoughts on this? On thinking you can do it all on your own?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think what you said about, sort of diversifying your mentors is such an important point, because you will get different things from different mentors, and being able to rely on different people for different things is going to be really helpful. So everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses, so the mentors are just people too. So but yeah, so don't think I have to find this one mentor who's going to do everything for me. Think about it more widely than that.
Yeah, and we've got some people saying that that was one of the best the sequence that we have on mentors and building up your dream team is one of the best that they watched. Okay, I'd love to hear that. It's always nice to know somebody's watching. And we get a lot of people, by the way, watching on the replay of these. I would say the vast majority of people participating on the replay. Let us know if you're on Team Replay, and we always go back afterwards and check your comments and the things that you put in. So do let us know, and we will come back to you. We are really international and spread across time zones, so it's always a challenge in figuring out which time to go live with these things. So we're really happy that you're getting value out of that. And guys, if you are getting value, invite your friends and colleagues. We really do want to spread the word about Fast Track, the good things that we're trying to do with this community. And send us your submissions. Every week, we will take your questions and go in depth on them. It's your chance to get immediate help and support from us. Just got an independent extra set of eyes that can help you deal with those questions. Like, is this perfect enough for right now? Is this am I completely lost? Is my gap clear? And how can I contact this potential person who would be awesome to work with, but is going to think nothing of me because I'm so small in the field? These are things that we love to take on. So the best way to do that is Courtney and I are always in the DM. So the easiest way is through Facebook to drop us a DM or to email me. And my email is davidstuckler at fasttrackgrad.com. And Courtney is at the same. So I'm going to pop our emails down in the chat below. If you do want to get in touch with us, reach out to us for support. We're actually opening up a couple slots for students. We really want to fill them here for August for our next fall cohort. And these slots for students don't open up very often. So if that's something you could be interested in, that's another reason, message us right away, and we will see if you could be a good fit. And we do like to keep the community small and intimate for that reason, because there's two of us, and we also have to be careful on our side not to spread ourselves too thin, because we really want to invest a lot of time and energy to make sure our students really thrive. But for a lot of you, you're going to get a ton of value just out of the 100% free video trainings. Again, we've got a lot going through a systematic review. And by the way, Courtney, I wanted to float an idea live here for a sequence that I thought could be a little bit of fun if we do this together. So I'm putting you on the spot a bit. Well, I thought about doing a series where, we've got our mini series on systematic reviews. Mm-hmm. And the students have loved those. I mean, I've had so many students say, I've gone step by step, and that was how I did my master's thesis. And that's awesome. I mean, people we don't even know are just saying, hey, I completed my master's thesis using this step-by-step guide you've got in the Facebook group. We've also organized that as a string of videos on YouTube, so guys, check that out too. I thought about doing something, Courtney, because you and I do so many systematic reviews, we can do them in our sleep. I thought, what if we take a topic and just live on this channel, just do a systematic review step by step, and instead of just we're talking about doing it, we just do it and explain what we're doing as we go. I think you and I are fast enough that in a series of 6 or 7, we can almost have done that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I thought about this idea before, like doing like some live research like that. I think it's a great idea.
I mean, I don't know if it would just
be really see the thought processes behind what's happening. You also see, like everyone's making mistakes. Everyone has messy Excel files sometimes.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. Anyway, guys, let us know in the comments if that's something you would be interested in. I don't know. Somehow in my mind, I think, well, people watching research, it's not going to be fun to watch people doing research. But if we're both doing it and explaining those steps along the way, I think our students get a lot of value out of seeing other students do things. Seeing like, really, this is the nitty gritty of how you go about that. And that's kind of been the magic formula in our training for students is you get the theory, but you actually get trainings seeing students do that step that you've got to do yourself. People are saying that they think that would be a cool idea. So we might look at this in the future. I thought about doing it for quantitative work as well, but people use so many different quantitative softwares, it could get a little tricky. So, okay, we're going to keep that in mind. Maybe, Courtney, you and I can cook up a topic. Actually, that's probably got to be the first thing in the video. Like, what topic are we going to do a systematic review on?
Yeah.
Maybe that's it, because we've got someone wants to say the research gap, and I think we're going to postpone that, and maybe Courtney and I will start a series here in the coming weeks, and we will actually start, Courtney and I, no preparation. We're going to find a topic live that we decide to do, and we're going to do a systematic review on it. So we will go through and show you our strategy for identifying a research gap and honing in on it. And yeah, we just got really lots of, I mean, guys, I'm really honored. It's really an honor to work with you guys, and we really appreciate the support from you as well. You know, Courtney and I do, it's kind of, I'm sacrificing my morning and Courtney's sacrificing her afternoon to be here with you guys, but you make it all worthwhile for us. And especially love when we have students, I mean, really in developing countries, because so many tell me that, I mean, every horror story, their supervisors don't answer. They, just a lot of students in this community have really had a lot of suffering, and just really encourage you to reach out to us. That's why we do employ some assistants in the group that can connect you to the right resources. So you're never bothering us, and we'll get you connected. Okay, I think this is a good point for us to stop. And also, Courtney, we got to dash to our next session with our students in the Slack group. Guys, so we try to answer all your questions. If we miss something, we're going to go back over the comments later. Let us know. And Courtney, any last thoughts as we wrap up?
Nope, I'm excited for this new research idea.
All right, we got to come up with a good name to call it. In the gaming community, people call things like this kind of concept like a speed run, or they're playing live, but it's not a game.
Like
I
a
don't know.
hackathon or something.
Hackathon, something like that.
Like
We
a
got to
researchathon.
researchathon. Yeah. All right, guys. If you in the community have any good names for this, let us know as well. We're gonna try this out. If it completely flops, that's okay. I think this is the other thing. Don't be scared to try things, even if they completely flop. Sometimes they can work out admirably. All right, guys. Everybody, have a great weekend. Remember Courtney's tip: activating break this weekend. Think about what you're gonna do, and we will see you all next week, next Friday at our usual time. All right, bye, everybody. Good to see you again, Courtney.
Bye, guys.